Welcome to the Performance Formula with Jody Martins. Andrew, officially welcome to the Performance Formula podcast. It's really awesome having you here.
Thank you. Great to be on, Jody.
Yeah. I have this feeling this is going to be another different conversation based on your sort of background and what you can bring to the conversation of performance, So maybe by way of introduction, feel free to maybe just share quickly what you do, who you are, and then we'll get into the thick of it.
Okay. Well, first of all, please don't ask me any technical questions, notwithstanding that we are a software company. I'm not I just learned recently that our iOS is on Swift and our Android app is on Kotlin, and that's about as far as I go.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, background is technically a lawyer. I did a JD MBA for grad school, and I'm licensed in Texas, but never practiced. And then just did investment banking and started the entrepreneurial path a long time ago when I was 30, and not in the fitness space at all, and wasn't really passionate. And so I'm fortunate now. We started Physmodo 8 years ago, and really trying to accomplish something pretty simple that hasn't been easy to do, and that's just to measure how people move. There's a lot out there with just with strength training or coaching in general, but the challenge on my side is that how do you know how to train somebody appropriately if you don't know how they move on that particular day? And so we needed to make an easy movement assessment and just use the overhead squat to measure your mobility, stability, posture, and symmetry. And really just providing information for an athlete if he or she's working alone, or a coach, trainer, doctor, if they're working with a client, member, patient. I think one of the taglines is movement is the forgotten component of fitness. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I like to say movement is a vital sign, and that you can't manage movement if you can't measure it. So we just try to get a quick self-assess, 30 seconds, get a lot of information, and provide data.
Why would you think this is important for sort of athletes or even everyday people to be aware of?
So there's a study with the disclaimer that it's from the CDC. So who knows how accurate it is, or maybe this one's not, but I don't, some of these studies, I wonder how they get information. But this particular study, which I have seen multiple times, so numbers are probably close. It says the number of Americans reporting the following medical conditions in the past 12 months. And this is old. So circulatory issues were 33%, respiratory 28%, diabetic related was 13%, and I think that's much higher now. We do a lot of things between lab work or some of the wearable data to provide intervening protocols if some of those numbers are bad, to lower the incidence of what I've just mentioned. But the number one healthcare claim is musculoskeletal.
Oh, wow.
And that's the only thing we don't measure. So we were measuring, HbA1c, your HRV, your glucose levels, all that stuff, and yet we're not looking at how you move and where you are susceptible to getting injured. I don't think people, in large part, don't think movement's important, but again, it's how are you gonna screen this frequently? It's just you're not getting blood work, and you're not wearing something on your wrist or your finger to just wake up and get the information. But you got to understand how someone's moving.
Yeah, 100%. I'm thinking of this. Maybe I'm going to say this all wrong, but one of the big reasons I like training is, and this was probably the only reason, because I'm not I hate physical exercise. To me, it's personally, it's not something I enjoy, especially to do it on my own. I love doing it with people, so like my wife or my son. But if they're like sick or something like that, I would skip it in a heartbeat. But one of the things that drives me with it is, other than maybe a little bit of sort of from throwing a lot of cricket balls, I have sort of a bit of a shoulder and a bit of a hip thing that flares up, and I know that if I train and I keep my muscles strong, all throughout my body, then those pains get less. But most probably my personal biggest driver for physical exercise is the understanding that as we get older, bones weaken, muscles weaken, and when we get older, falling, having sort of problems in those areas because we're not strong anymore, uh, there's a high percentage of sort of elderly that if they just trained, say, through their day, they'd be in a better place. They wouldn't be wheelchair bound, as an example, or they wouldn't have to walk with a stroller. They'd be able to still live their day every day, even if it's just like carrying a light bag from a shop to their home or whatever. They'd still be able to do that. But because there wasn't a focus on the physical sort of training, the later in life we're at risk for certain things.
Yeah, you bring up several good points there. So I'm gonna keep coming back to the things we do measure. And so let's just say your glucose levels are really high. That's not a good thing, but that's
Mm,
not going to prevent you from going to the grocery store and carrying your own bags, or playing with your kids, or carrying your kids, or everyday activities. So yeah, that's super important, and it interrupts your lifestyle, and that's not a good thing. And so yeah, you can, the glucose thing, you'll get the data. You can, I don't know, adjust diet or whatever you need to do to fix that. And so, but still, in the interim, it doesn't affect your day-to-day life. Or maybe you're eating healthier than you want to, and skipping some of the bad stuff. You then talk about, uh, elderly and falling, and the strength training is critical. My mom's 73, and I just, she was doing a yoga a few times a week, and like that's not going to help you with with your stability and your balance. A lot of the yoga folks have the best mobility in our scores, but their stability is terrible. So now I have her she's doing strength training just a couple times a week, but it's really helped her. She's had knee issues, and it's really helping. But in terms of falling, that is frequent, and young or old, the number two cause of injury behind previous injury, which is number one, and nothing we can do anything about other than trying to prevent it in the first place. Number two is asymmetry.
mm,
So we're measuring which side of the body you're favoring, if any, and that's important information.
mm,
Again, we're not telling you as a coach how to fix that. We're giving some suggestions, but now you have information that maybe you don't see that with the blind eye. My client is squatting to 90-degree depth on right side, but only 82 on the left side.
mm,
You're not to see that with the naked eye is tough.
mm,
And then to do it manually, all that, I mean, like if you're looking at your client, how accurate are you really going to be? So we want objective data, and consistent, because your movement's going to change from day to day. I mean, if you're, I don't know, in a plane all day, or you've had a heavy workout the day before, it just changes from day to day. So I just think it's critical for all those reasons.
mm,
And it doesn't only affect, I mean, I'll give you an example of my niece plays college basketball, and she really struggled this year with back pain. And she was told to get an X-ray, which I told her was worthless. Let's go straight to the MRI, and there's nothing on there. Maybe kind of a bulging disc, which shouldn't be that big a deal. But why is that happening? Well, I asked her, do me a favor, try and touch your toes and tell me how far you get.
mm,
And she is 19 years old and can get to her ankles.
mm.
Okay. I'm like, you need to have your palms on the floor, especially at
Mm.
your age,
Yeah.
because there's three things that can cause a back problem. that's not acute.
Mm,
It's bad core strength,
mm,
bad hip mobility, and bad hamstring flexibility.
mm,
So yeah, you can go get all the dry needling she wants or cupping or this and that, but you're not going to fix the root of the problem. Get your damn hamstrings flexible, and your
mm,
back will not be taking on the load. So all ages, we are giving data that will help prevent these injuries, and back injuries number one
mm.
of the musculoskeletal being number one overall. Back injuries are number one of musculoskeletal.
Yeah, I
So
certainly
much
have.
preventable.
Yeah. I certainly have walked a very long journey with my back. I hurt it the first time when I was 15 years old. This is now more than 30 years ago. And so I've had various stages of it feeling better, not better. I was a 15-year-old thinking I can bowl fast and didn't warm up properly. And I felt muscles in my lower back sort of move, sort of stretch. And my parents took me to the physio. Um, at that time, the physio did tell me I've got to stretch my hamstrings. They're pretty tight. So she gave me some stretches for that. It got better. And then maybe about when I was around 18, 19, I hurt it again. And then in my early 20s, I discovered that if I train, the pain goes away. So if I start strengthening myself, especially around my core area, uh, and specifically for me, legs. So if I squat and do lunges, those sort of things, the pain tends to go away. Then for a period of time, I didn't do that. I didn't do my exercises. So then after say 2 or 3 years, the pain comes back. Because I'm fairly active, I'm coaching, I'm on my feet every day, I'm moving around quite a lot, I'm throwing a lot of balls. So it's not like I'm living a sedentary life where I'm just sitting. But then after about 2 or 3 years, the pain would come back. And when I was around 30, I hurt it again. And then around 30, how many years ago is now? It's now maybe 7 or 8 years. So let's say about 37, somewhere around there. I hurt it real bad. 37, 38. To me, it's the worst it was. I hurt it to the point where I couldn't walk. I had sharp shooting pains going through my body. I couldn't throw the ball. So essentially, I couldn't do my job. So I stopped coaching cricket for about 5 years. And for the first year and a half, it was just recovery. I couldn't gym. I couldn't train. If I did one squat or two squats, it would be sore again. Um, to the point where last year I went to a biokineticist. And so there's something that you raised that I sort of maybe want to raise as well, is this idea that when we're informed, then we can do something about it. And I think this is what makes your technology potentially so awesome, is that it's a quick, easy, it seems like it's something that's quick and easy that can inform you pretty well. Um, I had a conversation with my mom earlier in the year, and we were doing these body scans things, my wife and I was all excited telling her about it. And she's like, "I don't care about that." And I'm like, "But if you don't know what's happening in your body, how can you like make sure that you're healthy, right? You're just going, you essentially you're eating, you're doing all these things, but you don't know, right? Maybe you've got something in you, a shortage of something, amino acid or something, and now you don't know that. And so if you don't know that, how will you know to fix that? you know. And so I thought my whole experience with a biokineticist was the same as that. Is all of a sudden she did all these tests with me, and I learned that my left leg is 2 centimeters longer than my right leg, which I'd never known before. And so that already creates an 2 centimeters to me is like a long way, right? So there's always essentially an imbalance in my hips. My hips are always um, adapting or adjusting for that in order to stabilize me, which then has an effect on my back. And then so she gave me a whole bunch of exercises that I'm sort of doing to help with the problems, so to speak, in my own body.
Yeah. So a few things there. Well, sorry you've had that issue since for 30 plus years, but
Yeah,
so going back to when you're 15, so yeah, you had tight hamstrings, but you also started bowling when you weren't warmed up. So
yeah.
could that have been preventable? Maybe not. I'd almost put that in the acute situation because you weren't warmed up. You went too hard too early, even if you had flexible hamstrings, great hip mobility,
Could have happened.
probably
Yeah.
would have been injured. So that's acute, which is, a small minority of the back injuries. Now, the problem is that you've now injured your back. The number one cause of injury is previous injury. So now as you've unfortunately learned, you're susceptible to a back injury. Now you're doing something about it. It's always something you're going to have to pay attention to.
Yeah.
So that's on the acute side. On the not acute side, it's take somebody doesn't eat like crap over the weekend and all of a sudden they're diabetic on Monday.
Mm.
That's not how it works. It's a buildup of 15, 20 years. Same with a lot of autoimmune. It doesn't happen overnight. And unlike your case, back pain doesn't happen overnight either.
Mm.
We can look at people's data and look at those, the core, the hip, and the hamstrings, and I'll tell you if you're going to hurt your back. Well, the answer is yes.
Oh, wow.
So, all right, if you're pre-diabetic, which I thought it was always like you're either diabetic or not. Now you're pre-diabetic. Well, at least you have some information and you can adjust whatever your diet. I mean, a lot of things are genetic, and but there are environmental factors. So yeah, change your diet, and you can do something about it. Well, fix the root cause of what's going to be an injury on the back, because your back is just taking on all this load. It shouldn't. Back takes up enough load as it is, but if the rest of your body's not doing the work, it's just a matter of time. And it's with other stuff too. And then you actually mentioned the 2 centimeters, so you're asymmetric too. I'm sorry, just piling on you here.
No, it's all good.
Tee me up, man.
Yeah, tee me up. I'm all good.
So yeah, and it's other things. I mean, it's staggering that the data from women's soccer, the number of ACL tears, and there's maybe not a lot we can do about that, but in terms of ACL tears in general or knee problems, so we're measuring whether or not you have a valgus fault. And for those that would know, it's when you're squatting, do you have a stable position or not? And if your knees are kind of coming inward, you're not stable. You are more susceptible to having a knee issue. So it's, again, we're just a lab test, physiological biometric data for movement.
I like that. Yeah, I mean, we're all moving. Earlier when you spoke about it, I think, yeah, I know these guys in the gym, athletes. A lot of them might train for their sport and train to enhance their sport in some way, and I would assume that they're considering movement within that. But I wonder how many do, right? Because often it's just, I need a bigger bicep. Like one of my former sort of people that I learned from in my mind, things to do in the gym and not to do in the gym, would always say there's the gym body, or the beach body, sorry. And so movement to me, or the way you sort of describe it, says it's not so much about that. It's not about the aesthetic. It's not about how you look, how ripped you are necessarily, but it's more about, are you able to, and I suppose you've mentioned stability and mobility. So it's more about that, and then the strength around that you're sort of saying is important just for general movement.
Yeah, and the data that we see are that the big, strong, fast people move the worst. So we have a contract with Special Ops. Strongest, fastest guys. I mean, you could see, I saw, was on site watching them work out. And so these guys are carrying 250-pound sandbags, which I couldn't even pick up. They're picking it up, like it is a grocery bag, sticking it on their shoulder, running and doing some cool stuff, but they can't move. And they're all young. They're in their 20s or something. So they're very susceptible to injury. It's, if you look like a...
Sorry for interrupting. If you say can't move, what do you mean by that?
I just mean that well, let's go. Let's actually segue to bicep. So you can't move because, yeah, you can lift a bunch, but your shoulder mobility is terrible.
Mm.
And so because your shoulder mobility is terrible, you're compensating a lot. Again, more susceptible to injury. Now, biceps, that's really interesting. Yeah, if someone, you can look however you want. If you want to have the beach body, great. I guess who kind of wouldn't. And that's fine. I'm not saying ignore that, but you want to keep that. You got to be able to move well, so you can keep training like you want. Now, on the biceps side, if you have poor shoulder mobility, and I'm going to pick on myself now, I've always had really bad shoulder mobility, and so what that led to was I ended up getting. I mean, in doing CrossFit, of our four tendons in our rotator cuff, everyone has something torn, but you can deal with it. And I end up getting a slap tear. So that was bad. Again, something you can deal with. But now that I have that, the rest of my body's compensating. I was doing a pull-up one day, just a strict, not a, you can't blame this on CrossFit type thing where I'm doing a kipping or butterfly. I'm doing a strict pull-up, and all of a sudden I heard this crunch. It's crazy. And it was a little scary, but I was trying to figure out what the hell just happened. But my shoulder pain went away, which is really weird. And so I was adjacent to this chiropractor, luckily, that I saw, and I went and I said, "This has just happened. It's so weird." And they're like, "Oh, well, what you just did was you ruptured your bicep tendon."
Oh, wow.
And the reason the pain went away is because a lot of the pain in the shoulder is caused by your bicep pulling down on it.
Oh.
So there's the two surgeries, as I was told by my doctor for slap tear, is to just cut the bicep tendon. I mean, which I effectively did myself, and I was out for a lot less time than if I'd had surgery. But he said, look, by doing that, I'm going to lose some strength, but I'm not a competitive athlete at that time at age, 40. And I'll have a Popeye arm, and I'll lose 15% of strength. I don't care. Now I can't do anything. Circling back to the bicep, I can't do anything really. I'm very, very careful on what I do and using that bicep because I only have the one side of it that functions right. Because I feel like if I can do a pull up, but if I do a chin up, I feel like my bicep's going to rip apart. So, for instance, if someone's trying to get good biceps, I'm extremely limited now. Now I'll have a Popeye arm, so it looks like I have a big bicep, but it's all related: back, bicep, shoulder. Ankle's the most important, I'd say, because it all kind of comes up the kinetic chain. If you have poor dorsiflexion, it's going to affect the rest of your movement, compromise everything. But we're measuring all that stuff, and we'll give you suggestions on what to do and do what you want with it. But you can keep your athletes healthier.
Yeah, I've had another guest on the podcast a couple of years ago, and he spoke about the same thing, that the ankles are way more important than almost like any other part, you know. And I think to myself, how often have I been in gyms where athletes are, even myself, if I think of training programs I've been given, the ankle is not something that's ever really in there as an area of focus, you know.
No, and then just think about a couple things like a back squat, and sometimes you'll see, or any type of squat, you'll see people wearing their lifters or putting some weights underneath their heel to assist. Now, if they have great dorsiflexion, then it wouldn't necessarily need to do that as much, but I'll show you how this affects everything. So I can squat we see this across the board. This is very common. People, well, they want to cheat the test, the screen, and I'll squat deeper and I'll get a better score. Well, you will get a better squat depth score, but a lot of times you are going to lean a lot more forward because you're compensating. Well,
Mm.
why is that happening? It's because you're almost invariably you don't have the ankle flexibility. So your ankle flexibility is now affecting your ability to squat lower. So now, if you're doing squats, so now you're not squatting correctly, and that's affecting, I don't know, where are you compensating on in your back? Your ankles are bad. You're leaning way forward, so you're not using your core. I
Mm.
mean, think about it. If you're leaning far forward, it's just you have to make a real good conscious effort to use your core. So, that's why your guest, presumably a lot smarter in the physiology side, if that's the
Yeah.
issue. But you you're screwed if your ankles are messed up. And I speak from experience because
Mm.
it's I guess it's kind of hypocritical that this is what I do for a living, and I'm not a good example of what we
Oh.
intend to provide for our end users. But yeah,
But
ankle.
that's what's probably why you are there, is because you know the pitfalls, right? If I think of how I coach a lot of things in the way that I coach them from a cricket point of view, because I weren't able to do it, and I understand the frustration and the anguish with that. And so I'd rather have people not have that experience with the game, because it's not a great experience. And so I can see that you have these struggles, and maybe you tried to figure some stuff out which led you to the path to be involved with this type of stuff, because you
Well,
know what it feels like to
yeah,
not have that. Yeah.
that again is another nice segue because I had a movement. It's kind of the impetus for doing this is I had a movement screen done on me in 2014, and I thought it was great. It had me do just different movements, and it was almost, I think it was just more binary. So can you, rotate to this, yes or no?
Mm.
And then it provided me a score, and it said, here are the things you need to work on.
Mm.
And I never did it again because I needed someone there,
Mm.
and it just took a long time. But I think our attention span I think, as Americans, is down to 14 seconds or something. Now, you can't
Mm.
do a screen in 14 seconds, but it's not much longer. Anyway, I thought that was really cool. I just thought that if I could do it more frequently and see how I'm improving and see if what the protocols I'm doing are working for my ankle or shoulder, that'd be great. This actually where this becomes an interesting AI play because I am now seeing any of our users can see what protocols works. Okay, so you have bad ankle mobility, and maybe you're doing something where you're, rolling out your tibialis or putting a kettlebell on your knee while you go down just to help. Well, that may or may not help, but we can tell. So now I know what works for people. We can direct them to. We have
Mm.
this recommendation engine, which is a big part of what we're doing.
Yeah, I actually like that, because my like I know that if you get regular feedback, then you can adjust quicker. So I suppose I'm in a similar position, because I saw the biokineticist last year, at the end of last year. Since then, I have had no feedback if any of the stuff is working, other than how do I feel? Do I
Yeah.
feel like I've got less pain in my back, or do I not? And in parts, yes, and in parts, no, but I'm not necessarily knowing if any of this stuff has actually improved. And so I think, to people listening to the podcast, I would encourage them to sort of obviously check you guys out and what you do, and sort of how that works. But I would almost guess anybody can do this. So it's, you know, moms and dads and coaches are listening to to my podcast, other than just athletes. And so, mom, are you moving in the way that you can move? Dad, are you moving, right? Coach, are you moving? Because if we're not, then we are compromised in some way, and we are, your body will. So a lot of my back pain on the right sits on the right hand side. I was at a chiropractor at one point in time too, and she was the first person to tell me, but it's because your left hand side's not activating. I went to most probably 3 or 4 different physios. None of them taught me that. None of them said that this is what's actually happening in your body. And so we're just treating the right hand side for pain, but why is the pain there? Is because the left hand side is not doing its job. So the right hand side is I'm not getting the right word now, but it's sort of stepping in. It's taking over the left hand side's job.
Yeah,
There's
you're
a
compensating is what you're doing.
compensating. That's the word. I knew it started with a C. I just couldn't
Yeah.
find it. I keep thinking compromising. I'm like, that's not the word. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
compensating, and that's what keeps causing the pain on the right hand side.
Yeah, and that's uh, people that have terrible back situation. I mean, if it's herniated or something like that, that I just know it's a handful of people. So uh, is this consistent across the board? I don't know, but they've all had surgery and they felt better, and then not long after they just went back to where they are because the root problem is not being treated. You're
Mm-hmm.
just going to go back. So if you're physio, yeah, it's great. You're the number one thing that works for me in pretty much any soreness injury I have is dry needling. It's awesome. So for instance, my shoulder mobility is terrible. A lot of that is my lats. My lats are just super tight and they just lock up. And I can roll with them on a foam roll. It just doesn't quite do it. But if I get needles stuck into it, it unlocks everything. And that's great. And I feel good for a day.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have to, kind of groove the neurological patterns by doing some correctives because your body can do, my body can be that way. Body can work, but your brain needs to figure out that that's how your body works. Because if you've been, that's the problem. You've been this certain way that your brain doesn't, that's what your brain knows.
Mm-hmm.
Then it takes it kind of at least 30 days to do some of these corrective protocols for your brain to start go, okay, you know what? For me, my lats aren't supposed to be tight the entire time. And so then my shoulder mobility gets better. So again, it's kind of to your point, you're gauging how you are now from when you were last getting all this testing based on how you feel. And just go back to what I said in the beginning is that you cannot manage movement if you can't measure it. And the same with everything else.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know your HbA1c is below 6, where it needs to be somewhere in the 5s? Well, okay, I feel better right now, and yeah, I've been eating well, so it doesn't tell you anything. So you gotta get it measured. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm super stressed. My HRV is out of control, low, which is bad. All right, well now I'm feeling less stressed. Or the things I'm doing to stress myself out less working. Well, my HRV's gotten a lot better. Okay, great. Same here. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
want to hurt my back. I know my hamstring is bad. Well, do some things for your hamstring, make it better. Well, if your hamstrings feel better, does that mean you're more flexible? I don't know. Let's find out.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm harping on
Yeah.
the same stuff over and
No,
over.
no, no, and I'm well aware. Like, because I see the gaps, right? If I take something like cricket, we do fitness tests, say, um, once every couple of months, as an example. But those fitness tests would be very sport specific. They would not be movement specific. They would not say, okay, we've also got to make sure that your movability is improving, And if the movability is not great, well, then you're at a risk for injury. Where what we tend to do is we tend to manage workloads, make fast bowlers bowl a certain amount of overs if they get a little bit too close, or if their workload is too high, and that includes, say, their physical training and their skills based sessions. If the workload gets high, then we'll say to them, hey, take a bit of a break because now you're at a risk of injury. But it's not taking this into account. It's not saying, well, can this athlete actually move effectively and efficiently? And I think it was a similar sentiment in the person that I spoke about, who I had earlier on, a year or two ago. Is it comes down to, like, can you move efficiently? And if you can, then you reduce the risk of injury, and then you're sort of set up better to go and do the skill specific stuff or the sport specific stuff, to be more optimal in them. Where if your movability is actually low, then you're at risk on that side, when it comes to
Yeah.
the sport
So
specific stuff.
taking your sport and you don't. Yeah, let's get a general idea of how you're moving, but whether it's a fast bowler, a slow bowler, a batsman, uh, certain positions in the field, and be that as it may, you want certain people to move better in certain places based on the position they're playing, right? I would think if someone's bowling, their shoulder needs to be, it's more important. I'm not saying your batsman's shoulder is not important, but bowler's probably more important. So let's focus, more on that. And maybe you do that already, but, and I know we focus a lot on athletes, but you brought it up 5 minutes ago. It's it's anybody. You don't have to be a high performing athlete. You want to be able to do the basic things in life, things we take for granted when we're healthy. So,
Yeah.
groceries, driving your damn car.
Mm.
I mean, mess up your ankle and, like, well, me, I drive a manual because I think it's cool. But if I do something to either foot, I'm in trouble. I mean, we take for granted being able to walk down the street, around the block, go to a park, walk, carry your kid, drive. So, I'm not trying to win the World Cup, and that, I'm trying to just do basic stuff, especially as we get older. There's things we can do about it. Like,
Yeah.
we need to move. We need to do the movement. And to your point, and again, what my mom's doing, you got to start strength training. Going to yoga is nice. It's better than nothing. But strength training and making sure you're having the mobility, stability, you're symmetric as you can be, all that.
It's super important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there, and I don't know if there's research or stats or whatever, but is there, you see a lot of rugby players that would post rugby would sort of struggle, right? Walking, or I don't know if it's just because of the nature of that sport, or you get a lot of ex-fast bowlers that after they've played the game, they end up having like really bad / severe physical problems because of the sport, right? And I'm sure it could be similar in other sports. In baseball, people who pitch quite a lot, maybe for the rest of their lives after the sport, they have, shoulder issues. Is there any, it doesn't have evidence or whatever it might be to show that this, like being more aware of our mobility, stability, our symmetry, how we move, that post performance, a career or whatever, there's benefits in that way too, versus just, versus say ignoring that and really just going for, just performance sort of benefits from a physical training point of view?
Short answer is I don't know about research, but we have our data.
Okay.
And let's pick 3 sports, and we'll pick rugby as one of them.
Yeah.
We're going out to a big national youth rugby tournament in a couple weeks, screening 500 kids we haven't before, high performing ones. So that'll be interesting. So let's take rugby. I played tennis growing up, tennis and triathlon. It's kind of a leading question if I ask you. So I will make the assumption of what generally people would maybe think in that. What sport 10 years after you've played are you more injured or compromised with your movement?
Out of those 3? Out of those 3?
What's the worst and what's the best?
So it was rugby, triathlon, and tennis.
Tennis.
I would think triathlon.
It is the worst.
Yeah.
And then what's second worst?
I would guess tennis. Because and I suppose because I think the perception might be that it's rugby because of the intensity of the training, but I'm thinking of the surfaces that you play on, and
exactly
the impact that has, maybe poor footwear, the repetitive nature of things on those surfaces. That's what sort of has me answering that way.
Yeah, so, and that's why it was kind of a leading question. I picked those sports. Well, number one, rugby, because you mentioned it, and I played it. And I picked the other 2 because I did them as well. So rugby's the safest. Tennis is the worst.
Oh wow.
and triathlon second, and you nailed it.
Mm.
You stole my thunder.
Yeah,
It's the
I'm sorry
surface.
about that. Yeah, it's the
Yeah, I mean,
surface.
look at
Yeah.
the tennis players. I mean, look at Djokovic right now. The guy's a mess. I mean,
Mm.
credit to him for what was it? One of the majors. He had meniscus surgery and he was out there 4 6 weeks later and got
Mm.
to the finals. But yeah, the on those hard courts and with the stopping and starting and it takes a big toll
Mm.
um, on your body. So that's the worst. And then triathlon and that's you're running on a hard surface, and then the cycling is a problem for a lot of people because again, if their back is if the bad hip mobility, they're going to have problems on the bike, and that's going to affect everything. Swimming is
Mm.
wonderful. And then rugby, you're playing on grass,
Yeah.
and and you're also not using your head as a weapon because you don't have a helmet. And
Mm.
yeah, you look at the way those guys play now. You watch an international match, and it's crazy. But how many, I know we're talking about post career, but not a whole lot of rugby players that really get injured. I mean, how many come
Mm.
off the pitch because they're hurt?
Mm.
I mean,
It's
maybe
normally
it's a
freak
concussion.
accidents.
It's
Yeah.
not because you're not seeing like a lot
Yeah.
of ACL tears or sprained ankles or rotator cuff or whatever tear. So, but you answered it. It's surface.
Mm.
It's surface. That's why American football, they hate playing on turf.
Mm.
They just they want grass because
Mm.
you surface. You're more susceptible to injury.
Mm.
So
Yeah. Yeah. So if I think of like the training environment, and I suppose this is where my understanding of this comes from is, but I've never put this together with myself. Is in cricket, our training environment is on a hard surface at times. If you think, especially here in the US, where I'm currently based, um, we have a training facility, which is a 6 months of the year we're in the training facility. We can't go outside; it's too cold. We're only getting to outdoors now from the start of April till maybe the end of September, and then we're back indoors from October to end of March. We're indoors. Um, that's where I stand and throw balls is on a hard
Mhm.
surface. It's not outside on grass. So I always try and make sure that I wear good shoes. It's the one thing that I don't skimp on. I would rather make sure I have a shoe that I feel comfortable in, that I feel absorbs enough of the impact, um, even if it costs a little bit more. Because for me, that's super important because I have this awareness that from cricket, we don't let bowlers bowl on hard surfaces too much, where, yeah, we have to at times because we have no choice, really.
Yeah. Where are you?
New Jersey. I'm based
Okay.
in yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And if you bowled outside in the winter, it'd be like bowling on cement anyway.
Yes, yes, yes. As well, it would also be a bit of a struggle. It's just, I think, way too cold, and the
Yeah.
fields and everything is snow covered, and so it's not really
Challenge.
possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's challenging. So we have to be indoors.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. But I think what this conversation is certainly sort of making me think about is how can we manage our winter better to alleviate growing bodies, because a lot of these are kids that we're coaching, growing bodies and the stresses that they face. Fortunately, then it's not like they're in there every day. It's maybe once or twice a week. It's no more than twice a week for most of them. Some come for like private lessons, or they come and do some extra stuff. So certainly it makes me think on how we can be more mindful. Are we doing things as efficiently and as effectively as possible to make sure we're not causing harm?
Yeah. So this could be interesting, and we can chat another time about how we can get you set up. But would be interesting to see people's movement scores when they're training outside
Mm,
versus when they're training indoors, and if that matters. I mean, maybe
yes.
maybe it doesn't,
Yeah.
but it kind of one of the main reasons we want to do this quick is assessment is so we want you to have your baseline, which if you're only doing a movement screen once or twice a year, you don't have a true baseline. There's too many variables that go into how you're moving. Imagine you measured how you sleep once a year.
Mm.
Worthless data.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's too many variables that go into how you sleep. So let's
Mm.
get a baseline based on 5 to 10 movement assessments, and then you can track all the time. But just thinking aloud here, just so you're indoors, you've been indoors for a month, you test someone one day and you notice they're way below their baseline somewhere. Now maybe
Mm.
it's caused by something other than the surface. I don't know, but at least now you know that this is 20% below their baseline.
Mm.
Don't know if that would happen.
But it would be interesting to find out.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. 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 Okay. David, Andrew, sorry, I've enjoyed this conversation. I, based on your understanding and sort of your experience with the things that you're doing, is there anything that you and I didn't speak about that's super important to know?
I think we covered a lot, and I'm glad we covered the part that's not about performance. It's just everyday life.
Yeah.
Because even those of us who are performing early in life, earlier, we're certainly. I went to Ironman and saw 27 people over the age of 70, but that I think is not typical. Um, but yeah, no matter how high a performer you are, and you talk about working with kids, yeah, their goals
Mm.
for moving well are just they change over time. They're
Mm.
not going to be doing you know cricket competitions when they're high level when they're my age and higher.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, everyday life, basic stuff that we take for granted. This
Mm.
is not just hey, I want to perform at the highest level for
Mm.
this match or so forth. So I'm
Yeah.
glad we touched on that.
Yeah. And my sense is, though, from the conversation, that even if you are an elite athlete, this is almost like the foundational stuff, So it's because it's for life, for everyday life. You live every day. The fact that you're a high performer is a bonus, maybe in some way. The fact that you have a career and you can live that life is a bonus. But at the end of the day, you're still a human being, and human beings, we've got to walk, pick things up, put things down, and do that for as long as possible in a safe way that doesn't just cause us additional pain, struggles, and injuries. And so, yeah, or at
Yeah.
least that's my sense about it.
Yeah, actually, the one thing I would add is, as we talk a bit about youth sports, is you and I are not getting taller at this
Mm.
stage of our life. And in fact, I think happened in shorter than when I was younger. But, someone in a big growth spurt will probably affect how they're moving. So
Mm.
I think the data is almost more important for high performing youth athletes because
Yeah.
of how much their body's changing. It's not, not just height, but are they carrying more weight, and how is that affecting, stability, probably in a better way. But, you know,
Mm.
things like that, because it certainly becomes a foundation
Mm.
then. But I had not thought of that aspect. But it's just like why you have in basketball, these lanky 7-footers just, they have trouble staying
Mm.
healthy.
Yeah.
And there's just the bodies aren't made for
Mm.
longevity.
Yeah. 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 We definitely have had that in cricket. I mean, we've got a cricketer in our academy who's gone through a severe growth spurt. Like, he was shorter than me. I'm not the tallest person, but he was, or maybe, like, say, just around my height last year. He's almost a head taller than me.
Hmm.
He just shot up in literally 6 months, to the point where he can actually not run, bowl, do those sort of things on advisement from experts, because his bones have grown too quick and the muscles have not caught up. So he's at risk for injury, because there's not this most probably not the stability, the support to keep things in place at this point in time. And so
Yeah.
now it's a waiting game with him. So, we're not making him bowl off a full run up. I think he could only start bowling last week, but it's like short run up, taking things slowly, building, while his muscles have time to he's not even in the plans at this point in time to bowl in games. I said to the mom, unless we get the full go ahead from people who are more smarter than me, I will make sure that we, fortunately this cricketer can bat too, so we can maybe use him in that role in the early parts of the season and sort of see how the bowling comes along. But definitely, I think there's, in cricket, we learn that you're at risk as a bowler, especially in that growth spurt phase because of these sort of things. And I'm sure there's other reasons for it too, but yeah, not enough. We don't pay attention to these things in like, and I suppose that's why I like doing the podcast, because I get to speak to people like you, which shines the light in areas that sometimes as coaches we do on a coaching course, but it just gets brushed over quickly. It's like, we know that mobility and stability is important. Okay, great. Off you go, so that maybe I can talk with the physical trainer about mobility and stability. Or if they say those words, I have an idea of what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like about this conversation, that it is something that you guys have, something that each person can essentially take control of that for themselves. Right?
Yeah,
They've got a way to measure it. They've got a way to track it. They've got a way maybe then to engage with their physical trainers in a different way to say, hey, these are my scores. Yeah, these are the areas I want to focus on. These are some of the suggestions. What do you think? Maybe that trainer's got some great add-on to that.
Yeah, and then just the taking your cricketers who's shot up quite a bit. If you have that person's baseline movement score before the growth spurt, and now you look at him now, so he's got to be able to adjust mechanics, everything based on his body. And I don't know how you guys decide when you can ramp up to where he was, but I mean, one metric could be, okay, when is your movement, when is your body adjusted so that your mobility, stability, all that is where it was pre-growth spurt? Because at that point, I think there's probably more confidence that he's ready to ramp up. But
yeah.
It's just another metric. There are a lot of others, but I think this one is overlooked.
And I think it's something that is quite easy to do if you have it before the time, right? If you're diligent with these sort of things. If you don't have it, well, then then it becomes more of a guessing game, I think.
Yeah, and again, you're no different than a lot. You know it's important.
Yes.
But you're going to spend a bunch of time before practice? No, but you can have someone do 30 seconds before practice and adjust training for the day if there's something compromised.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No. I've loved this conversation. If anybody's interested in connecting, reaching out, seeing sort of what it's all about, what's the best way for them to do that?
A couple things. I mean, get the basics on our website, and then I just love for people to reach out to me on LinkedIn and talk about just chat about it, or if there's a program you want to try it out that you're working with kids or individually, just please let me know.
Yeah, cool. And, I'll make sure that I link both of those in the description below. They'll be available there. Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. It's been fun.
Yeah, definitely has been a little different, a different take on things here on the podcast, but certainly from my perspective, very valuable. And I thank you for your time.
No, thank you.
Awesome. Cool.